Welcome to Beyond the Boardroom, a podcast hosted by Castle Employment Group. Today, I have great pleasure in introducing Giovanni Quaglia, a director of Cirrus Research in North Yorkshire. Thank you for joining me today, Gio.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. And first, of course, congratulations on your recent Best Places to Work award from the Sunday Times.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's fantastic.
It's really great to get that.
Oh,
well
lovely.
Done.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, we've worked together since you became a director at Cirrus Research, but I wondered for some of the listeners if you could share a bit more information about your background and what led you to become a director at Cirrus.
Okay, yeah, fine, thanks. So my background, I'm English, even my name's, my father's Italian. I'm originally from Southend, one of the greatest football teams in the world there, Southend United. I've been lucky to have had many senior finance roles, but also COO, general manager roles with large multinationals and SMEs. I've been responsible for operations between 10 million and 2 billion turnover with a handful of people, headcount or to 500. And the most luckiest thing of all really is, as well as living and working in the UK, me and my family, with work, I've lived in France, Romania, Mexico, Ukraine, Moldova, and now in North Yorkshire. So most of my time abroad was actually with agribusiness multinationals. But during COVID, like a lot of people, what do you want to do out of life? I decided to retire early to Yorkshire, where my wife is from. But after a few years, I got quite bored and my brain really needed, a bit of exercise. So I spent a stint as interim FD at Cirrus Research, which when that finished, an interim director role. Cirrus Research is a business with a goal of to stop people going deaf, basically. It's a family business, over 50 years, provides solutions to monitor and measure noise. The customers are people who want to make sure noise, manage noise for their employees, their customers, their members of the public. So like councils, theatres, racetracks, music venues, building companies, mines, etc. So if you've got a noise problem, come to the expert Cirrus Research. They also have a sister company, Contract Production, where I'm also a director and where we subcontract manufacturing. And they make all the equipment for Cirrus. So that's how I got to here in Cirrus Research.
Fantastic. Thank you for that summary. And I think one of the things that we wanted to talk through today, as a finance leader, business partnering is always high on the agenda across the organisation. How do you effectively bridge the gap between finance and other departments within the organisation from your experience to date?
For me, it's a couple of things. It starts with mutual understanding between departments and a need for a strong, solid senior team. If you've got them in place, then you've got a great foundation to build on. The first thing actually is what business partnering is. It doesn't mean that finance gets invited to all the meetings now. So what's some notes? Hang on, I'm reading them what it says from the book. Business partnering is where you use your insights and insights to influence business decisions and create more shareholder value. It's about supporting and challenging the business to continually ensure that what is done is aligned with your goals.
Okay.
Yep. So what that means is mutual understanding. You need to understand, departments need to understand what finance does. Yeah. It's not just paying the bills and payroll, but depending on the size of the organization, compliance, reporting, tax analysis, etc. And certain times of the month, you're going to be more busy than, the normal. The business doesn't stop. You can't just say, the other day, we've got an NDA, non-disclosure agreement for a tender tomorrow. Yeah, we need it now. It doesn't matter about what other projects you got on. But finance needs to also understand what other departments want and goals, right? Finance is a great place to be because people, other departments cross there and it's kind of center, people say. But the business machine is not there to keep finance busy. Yeah. The machine is to generate profits for shareholders. That's what the books say. But, of course, in the right sustainable way and, all stakeholders, the environment, employees are all satisfied, etc. But finance is the place where people come to ask for clarity, for numbers, one version of the truth, help, where people come and, say, my salesperson needs another report. You can't have a finance person say, but I went through that last month. What does he need new information for? Why does he want a new format? No, we're here to help. So that's the first thing that needs to happen, mutual understanding departments. Then you need a strong leadership team, yeah? So, and I've seen this from two ways. the way that works, open communication, collaborative, right culture, no blame, no hidden agenda, roles and responsibility clear, trust and vision, all the standard normal stuff. So once you've got this, then you can use your insights to influence and support each other, because you have more chance of being listened to and convincing the rest of the team, plus not just you convincing them, then you adapting your thoughts, yeah? So otherwise, and therefore, then you're all putting in the same direction or pushing in the same direction. But I've been in organizations where overnight they say, hey, I've read this book and now finance needs a business partner. So from tomorrow you're going to be business partnering. But you don't know, but you don't know what the other departments do. And then what happens, it's not partnering, it's the opposite. It's instructing, it's demanding, it's forcing through, it's using your authority to push things through, which works in the short term, yeah, but it's not great place to work in, is it really, in the long term? So they're the kind of things I think that you need for business partnering in this day and age.
Thank you. It's really helpful, and it's certainly the direction that finance functions and businesses need to be reflecting on and making sure that they're moving in that direction, because it's paramount, isn't it, to the success of it being integrated within a business. So I think that's really helpful advice. Thank you for.
And I think, business partner, of course, there are companies who have finance in the silo and they're the accountants, whatever, and that may work, and that's fine, and that's okay if you're the shareholder and the owner of that kind of business, that's okay. But 99 times out of 100, for you to get more value, monetary enjoyment, whatever else, ease of doing business, making that machine work better for you, you need business partnering.
Absolutely, thank you. And risk management wise then, in today's ever-changing business environment, what strategies do you employ or have you employed to identify, assess and mitigate financial risk? I think this is so crucial at the moment.
Yeah, and I think in answering this question, I want to encourage people to use risk registers, which we'll go on to. Some of the answers to the questions about, financial risk and what can you do, they're obvious ones, what's stopping me my targets, what could potentially change my costs, what exposures do I have, forex, foreign exchange, suppliers, items like balance sheet, so you got some normal kind of ones, which most people say, well, obviously that's obvious how you look after them. But, but how do you differentiate between the different levels of what can go wrong? Yeah. And we've all gone through some huge risk scenarios in recent times, which haven't just meant yet to write off the occasional accounts receivables, right? But being true life or death situations for companies. COVID, right? Global pandemic. The recent last week or this week, CrowdStrike IT outage, right? These are huge risk items that have destroyed companies, right? So, and I think for what I'm going to go and say is talk about mainly for things that can really have a big impact, not little mosquitoes which are annoying, going to off or whatever else, but for big things. So how to identify these things? I say keeping your ears open, you'd be intellectual curious, and the types of environment where I've been lucky to work in is I've worked in the old East Europe emerging markets, in tournaments of looking at the big risk and what if that happens, what if that goes bust, what to do if the tax losses suddenly get used up or lost because of a government change. So it's a lot of what ifs. So
and that's how you identify then, by asking the what ifs ultimately.
And that is a trade tab. What if this goes wrong? And you need to have an environment where people can bring things up. I really hate the phrase, don't bring up a problem unless you've got a solution. Hang on, global pandemic. How many people are a solution for that, right? You get partnering. You get people in the room, you get partnering, So, and therefore, for the large kind of risks, environmental, business interruption, all the standard kind of, you would imagine that companies would have on a risk register, cyber risk, safety, loss of key personnel, recalls, etc. You need to keep a risk register. Why? Change in regulations, why from the business? You need to make sure if they're there and you use it, you will, in theory, have a process to make sure you regularly use it. Look at change in regulation at Cirrus, noise monitoring. The role is we need to stay in line with regulatory changes. It's changing all the time. and we're selling equipment that is going to enable customers to keep in line with the standards. If we don't have a process to make sure what we're buying is coping with the new standards, we're out of business. So you need a process in place. So when you have these kind of risks, then people say, how do you assess these risks? And in the books will tell you, there's quantitative analysis, there's risk modeling, there's mapping, where you have this map and visuals, and you put financial priorities against them and numbers. And that's fine for some organizations, absolutely fine. But everywhere I've kind of worked, it's about probability of a problem and the impact of a problem. Then just put high, medium, low. And then really you probably want to start with the high things, right? However, when you then go on to the next thing, mitigate them. Biggest one we've all gone through, global pandemic. Where's that been a high? Nobody's, right? So, how many companies actually had a decent plan? But in theory, in a practical level, there's so many things that you can do which will answer so many of the questions. It's the importance of diversification, revenue streams. Here at Contract Production, we always say, but do we really want our one large, massive customer? That's great, but what happens with building that foundation? So revenue streams, product types, supply chains, do we really on one core supplier? What happens? So the value of optionality is worth something. Yeah, but we can do better with this thing here, with having, with one, we get better deals. Yeah, but think about it in the, in the bigger
Sure.
picture.
And should that be across the senior team then, or is that the expectation of the senior finance person in the business?
No, absolutely the senior team, absolutely the senior team. So when you've got all this thing here, you look at it, you've got a risk register, you need to review it with the senior team. The best company, it has to be with the senior team, because things change. Things change, people change. It has to be with the senior team, because for any of these things that we talked about, pandemics, legislation, cybersecurity, whatever, it's not just finance. Yeah. Finance can say, the sales guy can say, if you're working in an ice cream factory, yeah, we've got this great big launch, but what about summer if the weather's awful? Well, hang on, maybe the insurance you can get out. Insurance, I can give some of my profit away, to the insurance company. It needs to be everybody. But most importantly of all, how you survive a risk event is make sure you have access to emergency funds, right? If you can, so that means that you've got cash reserves or credit lines. And therefore, again, it's important, goes back to why it's important to be a great business partner and make sure you help the business add value. Yeah, that's your best way to try and work your way out of a big risk situation.
Fabulous, thank you. That's really comprehensive and some really great takeaways for lots of our listeners there. So thank you so much for sharing that. And certainly something that's on my agenda every week. It's on my to-do every week. It's in every networking event I'm going to around the recruitment sector, and certainly with other senior leaders of organizations that I'm networked with. AI and automation is a topic every owner, every leader is discussing currently. Can I just ask, how do you see AI impacting the role of the finance team in a business moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious big question, and the answer is obviously huge. Has an impact? It's huge. Head of story, 10 out of 10, right? You get the answer. You've answered it. But it's but importantly, it's how and when will your business take the plunge, right? And from a finance point of view, it's, when you look at, in reality, where should an organization invest? It's not normally to say, let's have a bigger finance department, right? Because that doesn't normally increase the margins. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't normally increase the margin profitability. So, but when you talk about automating, saving time, the more a finance department is able to redeploy the resources internally from doing stuff to partnering at value adding, then that's going to be where it goes. Now, me personally, I know that I am not an AI expert at all. Yeah, I just see it there and everything. And there's so many areas where I see, you can kind of say, but Giovanni, processing data, AP automation, that was a kind of AI, right? Yeah, that was a simple one. Well, the companies don't do this. I remember one of your previous podcasts, somebody said that they did that and they massively, reduced their department, etc., with the kind of the basic, automation techniques. But I read The Economist, and last week I think they had a big section about AI in education, about And that was phenomenal about spotting trends in data and listening. When you then, listening in as well as, typing, so for finance, spotting patterns in data, we've always about who are your main customers, what biggest turnover, but margin, what about time spent, product trends, seasonality. Again, AI in theory will do all this stuff, forecasting, predictive analysis, trends, all this kind of stuff, making it look nice. And I see you always see when you open up, Microsoft in the bottom, Copilot, you click on it, you look at it, and it says, please click here to pay an extra 50 quid a month kind of thing. You go, oh gosh, I don't mind playing around with it, but, so all these automated tools, credit scoring, customer support, chatbots, we know and love now, click here, we're online, and and especially repetitive tasks for finance. One of the organizations I worked in before, we had instead of a monthly close, we had a daily close in the financial markets, a daily P&L. And you see what we do in finance and close for monthly, and you look at those tasks and you say, why can't a robot, if you program a robot, do these things? Reducing human error, etc., etc. I know that people are going to say, but maybe you're going to have AI error. I understand, but the impact is going to be huge.
Okay.
Now, what will you do about it, right? How much money will you spend on it? When are you going to start? When are you going to plunge in, right? And I think that's the biggest thing, that you've got some organizations where the leaders are bleeding edge and they want to, let's do this now, yeah. But to me, I would say that my role is not necessarily to be the world expert in that, but to make sure that I don't have to reinvent the wheel. If I've got a problem, if I can go to a community, online community, there's a online community called Gen CFO. They actually dip in and out of stuff, and it's always talking about what other companies are realistically doing. So dipping in and seeing what can work, and in those kind of communities, you don't want the sales pitch, you hear the real story about, well, that's great. However, when you then go onto a fantastic computer system, like ERP, and then in the end you find out that you basically have everybody doing work on Excel spreadsheet in the end. What realities happen. So just pick and choose, use your professional networks and look at that. But the impact's going to be huge.
Okay. And
it's when are you going to go in? Now, the interesting thing is the next generation of CFOs, they don't do gamings on laptop. Everything now's on phones. So you think about AI and phones and finance in the future years, take a photograph of an invoice, and, so the impact's going to be huge. And the question is, when are we going to jump into it? And I think a lot of it will be following, but not too far back, and just, and the way to make sure that you are following the right place is by just keeping your eyes and ears to the ground and choosing and being networked in, I think.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And certainly at Castle, it's part of how we're starting that is by mapping our current process and working out where there is duplication and how much of the job that we're doing is duplication, how many people are doing that, and how long does it take them to do it, and can it be automated? So it's often sometimes just about actually reflecting on your finance function and working out which are the duplication tasks, like you mentioned, the ones that are repetitive, and working out if there is an automation platform that would allow that person to gain some more time.
But one of the things I'm sure you as a business owner is that you can spend all your time on this really interesting, nice stuff, and meanwhile business and whatever is whizzing here. So it's a balance about jumping in and where do you actually put your efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. So you've clearly made a significant contribution to the organisation throughout your career. Can you share a piece of advice for aspiring finance professionals who wish to make the same impact that you've had?
I think, you say a piece of advice, I was thinking about this, and there's three pieces, right? Get involved, know your trade, take control of your career, right? Get involved, be curious. I was very lucky in my career. I worked for organizations. We had multiple teams, multidisciplinary teams, and you could get involved. I'm a very nosy person, so I've always wanted to know why does engineering do this and whatever. So that's one, where you can just get involved in multidisciplinary teams and projects. Yeah. It's fun, it's interesting. So that to me worked. It's just, broadening your kind of, what's out there. Knowing your trade. this works two ways. I mean, I was very lucky from the point of view, I grew up in old school, so I didn't have to write debits and credits on a bit of paper, but I had to understand it because the systems were so basic. You had to know, where did this go? So you had to really know your trade, and that really has helped me understand stuff. And now it's more difficult because of, what happened in the system? Well, I don't know. I just put it in and don't know what happened. But you need to know your trade, you need to know your craft, and that means making sure that once you know that, don't wait till you know 100% before you ask for action, but don't just jump up like so many people who I've seen, unfortunately, people who have wanted to be over-promoted, and I'm sure my boss doesn't do much more than me, so I'm just going to go for that job, and they get promoted, and they really don't have the foundations, and often because their foundation's wobbling, somebody else who's got that has whizzed past them eventually. So really try to know your craft and your trade. Another thing is taking control of your career. Yeah, it's not the company's looking after your career, it's you. Yeah, and that doesn't matter where you are. If you want to go to the top or whatever, this happens at all levels. So I've seen an accounting assistant who wanted to grow to a supervisor and agreed on a development plan and got AAT and PARP qualified, and is where they are, is very happy. They've got a great work-life balance. And I've also known, when I worked a CFO in a 250 company, I worked with him, and he knew exactly what I wanted. So he went for roles like in treasury and departments where I wouldn't, why are you going there? Why do you want to do that? Because he knew where he wanted to end up. So he took control of his career, and he knows where he want to go. So therefore, when you're, retiring, you look back, you can't say it was the company or the river taking you there. You chose where you're going. So that's what I would say. And try to enjoy what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And I know in my Vistage group, we're always talking about start with the end in mind, because that aligns with what you're saying on that third piece of advice. Because if you know where you want to be, then you can work it back, can't you, to get there? So again, really fantastic advice. Thank you. And in the role of a director, multiple companies, finance director, COO, where you're at currently, you must juggle multiple priorities daily. And I'm really interested to hear if you can share some techniques or tools that you use to manage your time and to really make sure that what you're focusing on is the most critical task. I mean, I'm sure I've got lots to learn. I'm looking forward to your answer on this.
I think in general there's no one answer, but what fits with you best, and you should try. So I think that's in general. But I do work for different companies, and I work on different projects at this moment in time. And so there's a few questions you should ask yourself. Number one is, so what should you be working on, right? What is critical? Yeah. And, and we know that in finance, some things that you need to be non-negotiable. You've got reporting deadlines, you've got audits, you've got taxes to be got. Well, they usually tend to be non-negotiable, right? But who are your main customers? Your main customers is your boss, who in my case will either be an owner of a company or an owner company, and the business. They're your two bosses, right? So how do you satisfy them? Yeah. How do you satisfy your boss? Presumably you should be spending time that's going to satisfy your boss, who is taking the most critical decisions, in the company normally, to make them happy. And if your boss knows what you're working on, you're setting expectations with your boss, and, and you're doing what you've agreed to do, then that's a good start, right? Now, I've worked with bosses who couldn't care about it's year end, or you've got a bank meeting, discuss your covenants or whatever. And therefore, what's important is expectation setting. So expectation setting is important. Which I've learned this the hard way. And with this is about frustration. As somebody, and I always get this kind of slightly wrong, but mainly right. But what is expectation setting, and what is the outcome? You're trying not to get frustration. Frustration is the difference between expectation and actual. You're expecting this thing on Tuesday, and you get it on Thursday. That is frustration, right? Frustration. You promised something by this. Now it's Thursday. It's not about now. If you then told this person, your expectation now is here. Maybe you're so happy about it, but you don't have that frustration, that anger, that emotion, annoyance, And it's not about over-promising, under-delivering, that kind of stuff. It's being open and honest about your work, your working. So it's about agreeing prior to the boss, realistic, having the ability to then not just agree with them, because that's often easy. Because, look, I'm sure you have it, Kerry, if you want to start something, it's very simple. You can bring somebody in, can you work from that? Off you go, right? But then how do you keep people updated? And it's easy for you to choose how to update them because you'll just call them in. You're the boss. Your time's more valuable. But how do you as the FD, get your time? How do I get your time, Kerry? Is it regular meetings? More meetings, emails. I don't want emails. But I have to work it out. Is it catch up over a coffee? Is it a bit of everything? Is it catch up? So it needs to be, you need to set away with your boss, not just giving me the expectation, but how do I give you the updates? That's important. For that one, critical is your boss. The other part is the business. What is critical for the business? Well, it's simple. Your vision and goals. That's what you've said that you're going to get to. So now you have to make sure that what you're working on is achieving your vision and goals. And how do you do that? Therefore, you need a kind of system for capturing that and keeping on track. So there's many kind of tools. You have annual objectives. You put them down. Now, one of the things at Cirrus Research, we use a tool called Reclaro, which is a project, which is a system which helps you clarify your company's strategy and vision, breaks it down into objectives, key results, and milestones. It's a very good tool so you can actually see, are you on track? So you need a kind of tool like this to make sure you're working on the right things. So now how best to manage your time then, with all these things. Now, the few things that help me is don't reinvent the wheel, just try stuff. So learn from other bosses, learn what works and copy it, and learn, stuff that you've seen, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. And just don't do them. A couple of books that are recommended, prepared earlier. So Getting Things Done by David Allen. It doesn't look fun through, but it has been. I think I gave one of my daughters, this book before. So this is a great book, Getting Things Done. And the other one is another Atomic Habits by James Clear. And there's also a podcast, a weekly email he does, a little simple one he does. Them things, so these are not niche, these are bestsellers. So you'd have to read, so they're bestsellers. And so that I would strongly encourage, invest a little bit of your time in reading these. Now, practically what works for me is I need to write stuff down. I have to write stuff down. And I have to write stuff down and I have to keep, reviewing it. You have to understand your strengths and weaknesses. I don't think I forget things, but I get easily distracted. If I'm in a room talking to you and somebody talks about a customer and potentially late payment, part of my computer brain thinking about that, so I have to write things down. So I jot everything down in a black and white. I have a black and red, right? In black and white, on red and black. Yeah. And it has to be on paper. There's another great podcast called Manager Tools. And that I recommend people, Manager Tools. And in there, it's about why you shouldn't take notes on laptops. You're reinforcing the way your brain is geared. And I keep these things. So once a week or so, I will go through and I will then cross out. Luckily, my writing is so bad that nobody can see this. I cross out to make sure that what I've got there, I transferred onto a to-do list. So I keep to-do lists, yeah? I keep to-do lists. I keep lists, for me to do, my priorities with my bosses on that particular thing. And I go through and then, and once a week, I then cross things out to make sure they're actually on my to-do list. And I continually do that. And, every morning, so I've got a list, and every morning I have another pad, which says what I should be doing today. And the first thing in the morning, I write it down. And then when I hear this conversation, I just write something down. So I just write stuff down, yeah? And that works for me, yeah? And I know that some people say, no, I don't like to-do lists, or some people say, I've tried Remarkables, these kind of digital...
Yeah.
Some people like Outlook Task or these apps, whatever. Fine, but on the assumption you don't have a photographic memory, please, the only way to keep stuff is just to write them down. So I have, for Cirrus, I have one book. For other projects, I have another one down. Write it down and experiment, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. So that's my very old basic
Fabulous.
stuff.
But I think ultimately the message is there in terms of the boss and the business. That's absolutely vital. And I think you do need to keep trying new things. I'm absolutely totally aligned with everything that you've just said. I have a pen in hand and lots of pads,
Yeah,
and I've tried the Remarkable. I am trying to move to do on Microsoft Task, but it is, you can try it, but you ultimately end up going back. But I think what's really important is making sure, we also use Reclaro, that that every goal that you
good.
are aiming to achieve is moving towards that vision and the sole purpose of where you want the company to go. And I think that's where a lot of people do get lost. So I think that will be really invaluable advice.
Yeah.
So thank you, and more importantly, thank you for taking time out of your really busy day today. It's been so insightful. I've really enjoyed it. I'm absolutely certain that all
Thank
of
you very
our
much.
listeners will do as well. And so a really big thank you to Gio. And again, I'll look forward to catching up with you soon. Thanks very much for your time,
Thank
Gio.
you, Kerry. Thank you very much, Kerry. Thank you.